Barron Trump tried to publicly challenge Representative Jasmine Crockett on live television, but what he received instead was a sharp, steady reality check that left him reconsidering everything. The cameras captured every moment. The air in the auditorium was not tense, only expectant, as though everyone sensed something unscripted was about to unfold, but no one knew exactly where it would come from. When Barron Trump stepped forward to the microphone, there was a ripple through the crowd, not merely because of his name, although that always carried a certain weight, but because of the confident way he presented himself. His shoulders were squared, his voice firm. He did not come there to stumble, or so he believed. The town hall was being broadcast live across the country. A panel of lawmakers and young leaders sat lined up on stage inside the Gerald Ford Civic Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat third from the left. She was dressed impeccably, her gaze sharp, as though she could see through any false front. She did not lean back, nor did she often smile. She simply listened. Barron was 18, newly graduated, and recently pushed into the conservative youth spotlight. His team had prepared him thoroughly. Speak with strength, stay composed, and deliver his points solidly. He cleared his throat, stared directly at Crockett, and said, "Congresswoman Crockett, I have followed some of your previous legal cases and public statements. It is difficult to take certain individuals seriously when they use outrage as a means to build their careers." The mood shifted, not with a gasp, but with the sudden quiet that falls when people hold their breath. She did not react, not even a small flinch. There was no quick retort or dramatic show. Crockett only tilted her head slightly, as though she had heard the same line 100 times before, just never from someone so young and so certain. "Mr. Trump," she began, her voice level, "it is revealing that the loudest critics of my tone almost never have anything to say about the facts that made that tone necessary." That was when the low murmuring began. Yet she continued. Her words were precise, but they were not meant to injure. They were meant to uncover. She spoke about the young girls she had defended in court who lacked media support, family influence, or any safety net. She mentioned a 12-year-old client she represented in Dallas who had been suspended for talking back to a teacher, only for it to come out later that the teacher had been caught on tape mocking the child's way of speaking. She described how outrage was not a strategy for career advancement. It was a means of survival. "You call it outrage. I call it using the tools I possess to stand up for those who have none. And you, standing where you are, should be asking why so many people still require someone to fight for them." Barron blinked, unprepared for this kind of reply. This was not the conversation he had rehearsed. He tried to answer, "I am just saying," but she interjected, her tone unchanged. "No, you're not just saying. You are performing, and unfortunately for you, I do not hand out applause for poorly written scripts." The audience did not burst into cheers. That would have made the moment feel cheap. Instead, they sat there, silent, witnessing a young man with a famous last name being brought down to earth, not through insults, but through calm intelligence. The moment spread quickly. By the time the broadcast ended, short clips were already circulating on Twitter, TikTok, and in every group chat that thrived on political conversations. The headlines practically wrote themselves, but they missed the deeper layer. This was not about humiliating someone. It was not about overpowering another person. It was about what occurs when someone accustomed to control enters a space where a well-known name does not shield them. Because Crockett did not attack him, she revealed the weakness in his argument, without ever turning cruel. That was what stung most. She remained calm, composed, and exacting, and somewhere in the middle of her response, Barron's expression shifted. His eyebrows drew together, and his mouth fell slightly open, as though he wished to reply, but could not find the words. He was not debating a television commentator. He was speaking to a woman who had spent years battling systems that paid no attention to names, fighting uphill without cameras watching. She never raised her voice. She had no need to. But this story did not begin there, and it certainly did not conclude there. It was not random. It was not one of those rare confrontations that happened by chance in airport waiting areas or behind the scenes in green rooms. The town hall had been in planning for months. Officially promoted as Voices of Tomorrow, it was a national Youth Policy Forum intended to close the widening gap between Generation Z and Washington. The event was designed to appear modern, feel urgent, and, above all, attract attention. The producers at C-SPAN knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted headlines, but more importantly, they wanted something genuine, something that did not seem scripted. So they decided on a panel made up of prominent lawmakers and invited selected Generation Z speakers to challenge them directly. That was how Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett became involved. Outspoken, straightforward, assertive. A former public defender turned lawmaker from Texas, she had built her reputation by refusing to play it safe. Her supporters admired her for that. Her critics disliked her for precisely the same reason. And then there was Barron Trump. From the beginning, his invitation sparked debate. He was not a politician. He was not even enrolled in college yet, but he had been appearing in media since. He turned 18 podcasts, live streams, and speaking spots at conservative youth events held behind closed doors. Some producers thought bringing him in was a gamble. For others, his name was powerful. It was sure to draw attention. The plan was simple. Put him on stage as a representative voice for young conservatives. He accepted, reportedly ignoring advice from certain family members. They warned him that policy forums were not the same as campaign rallies. Yet Barron felt certain he could handle it. Perhaps too certain. He grew up in places where people often agreed with him before he even finished speaking. That was not how things worked here. The forum took place in Grand Rapids, but it covered much more than local topics. Questions touched on climate policy, free speech, digital privacy, and criminal justice reform. 4 politicians sat on stage, each answering pointed questions from a youth panel. Crockett faced most of the pressure, and it was obvious early on that she was not avoiding any subject. Barron's chance arrived about halfway through the event, but even before that, he had been posturing a bit, writing quick notes, whispering to a handler sitting behind him, glancing at the camera between segments. If you were watching closely, it was clear he had something prepared. The young man next to him, Elijah Moreno, a 19-year-old student organizer from Fresno, leaned over during a commercial break and tried to whisper some advice. He suggested Barron should relax and let the discussion flow naturally. Barron brushed him off. "I got this," he said. The cameras did not capture that part, but several audience members later shared what they saw. Meanwhile, Crockett was standing her ground firmly. When a question came up about the conflict between police unions and advocates for reform, she avoided empty talk. She spoke about contracts. She spoke about civilian review boards. She did not perform for the camera. She focused on the facts. Barron had been studying, waiting. He had not been brought in to stir trouble, but that was what he decided to become. Whether it was pride, pressure, or simply wanting attention, no one could say for sure. But when he took the microphone and looked directly at her, he did not ask a question. He launched into a speech, a brief one, but dripping with condescension. He pointed out her record of expressing outrage, claimed she was louder than she was effective, and questioned how her legal experience translated into real policy results. It was not subtle. It was designed for quick social media clips, short, sharp, and provocative. The audience did not boo, but there was a shift. Crockett remained motionless. Her face did not change. She waited until he finished speaking. In that silence, something significant took place. It became clear, at least to viewers watching from home, that this was not two people equally exchanging ideas. It was a young man trying to land a punch with his father's reputation behind him, and a woman who had been through far too many real battles to react with fear. Yet what happened next was not a political counterattack. It was something far more intentional. He seemed certain this was his moment. The cameras were already zooming in closer. The moderator gave a subtle signal. Barron adjusted his jacket sleeve, imitating a gesture he had watched his father make countless times on stage. Then he stepped forward. He did not falter. That much was obvious. His voice was calm, firm, almost practiced. And perhaps it was, because once he started talking, it felt less like a question and more like a statement crafted to go viral. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, "I have read about your career. I have followed your legal work and your time in Congress. But do you not believe there is a difference between fighting for justice and seeking conflict for its own sake? Sometimes it seems as though you are more focused on being loud than on being correct." He paused deliberately, letting the words settle. That was the moment his team likely instructed him to capture the clip they hoped would spread through conservative channels. The words themselves were not especially new, but the way he delivered them, the half smile, the confident stance, the slow blink afterward signaled he believed he had scored a victory. Only he had not. Jasmine Crockett did not speak immediately. She did not lean back or grab a microphone, as if she were on a talk show panel. She just stared at him, truly stared. If you were present, you could feel it. It was not anger. It was not shame. It was something heavier, disappointment, the kind of look a teacher gives a student who decided to show off instead of showing up ready. She leaned slightly forward. "Barron," she started, skipping titles or formalities. "The trouble with speaking before you have lived enough is that you mistake volume for vision." That was it. No shouting, no insults, just truth offered as a lesson. He tried to jump in quickly, hoping to throw her off balance, but she was not finished. "You think this is all about being loud? Let me explain something," she said, keeping her voice level, her eyes firmly locked on him. "When I was practicing law, I stood in courtrooms in front of judges who told black girls they were too emotional when they cried after being assaulted. I have been in courtrooms where silence itself was used to stop justice from happening. So no, I did not stay quiet just to keep people comfortable." He did not say anything. "Not right away. So she kept going. "You have grown up in a world that gives you the benefit of the doubt before you even open your mouth. Most of the people I fight for do not even get the chance to be heard. So when you call it outrage, what I hear is you saying that I make you uncomfortable because I refuse to disappear, and I am not shrinking." Somewhere in the crowd, someone let out a quiet hum. It was not mocking, nor sarcastic. Just one of those sounds people make when the truth hits home. Barron stood there, still. He had not expected this. His talking points were precise, but lacked real depth. He glanced toward the moderator, uncertain whether he should answer, step back, or simply remain silent. The moderator stayed silent. "I respect your perspective," Barron finally said, sounding a little more rigid than before. "But I still believe tone matters in public service." That was when Crockett delivered the line that would be clipped and replayed for weeks. "You care about tone because you have never known what it feels like to need content." No yelling, no finger pointing, just a calm, sharp rhythm, the kind of delivery that moves past politics and strikes somewhere deeper inside you. And in that instant, it was no longer just about him. It was about every person watching, everyone who had ever been told they were too angry, too loud, too much, when all they really felt was tired of being overlooked. Yet, as pointed as that moment was, what truly shifted the mood in the room was what she said afterward. She did not fidget or adjust in her chair, even as Barron's jaw tightened slightly and his fingers tapped a silent beat against the microphone. Crockett stayed grounded and steady. Her voice carried weight, not because it was loud, but because she was not trying to impress anyone. She was not selling an idea. She was sharing a life he had never experienced. "Tone," she repeated softly, as though the word itself missed the larger point. "You brought up tone. But tone did not get me through law school while working night jobs. Tone did not help me comfort parents who had just lost a child at a traffic stop. And it certainly did not keep me composed when a district attorney accused a teenage girl of acting grown simply because she wore lip gloss to school." Now, her hands moved just a bit. One hand rested on the table before her. The other traced a small line in the air as she spoke. Not for effect, but with purpose. "Tone is a tool people use when they want to avoid dealing with the substance of things. I am not here to sound polite. I am here to speak the truth." Barron did not interrupt. Whether it was respect, unease, or simply careful calculation, no one could quite tell. But something had shifted. He was no longer leaning forward. His posture was still alert, as if waiting for permission to breathe again. Crockett went on, this time addressing the audience more than Barron. "We have come to a place where young voices are welcomed into these spaces, but only if they are agreeable, only if they smile, nod, and say thank you for crumbs. That is not dialogue. That is performance. A few students sitting near the back exchanged glances, not because they disagreed, but because they recognized she was speaking about them as well. They had seen that balancing act up close. Being heard required being cautious, measured, and easy to accept. I want young people to speak up, Crockett said. I want you to challenge me, but do not come at me with scripted shots and expect me to flinch. You do not walk into a fight and assume your family name will handle it for you. She paused, then turned her eyes back to Barron, not with hostility, but directly. I have buried friends because systems failed them. You have been featured in magazines for being tall. The line landed not with cheers, but with quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when people are too absorbed to react. And even then, her voice never rose. Her words stayed calm, personal, unbroken. Her body language was a lesson in restraint. Each gesture supported her message. Every pause allowed it to sink in. Barron finally spoke. I think I see your point, he said, though his words hung somewhere between acknowledgement and stepping back. Crockett smiled. Not boastful, not dismissive, simply a subtle, knowing smile, like she sensed a small change, even if only slight. You do not have to agree with me, she said, her tone softening just a bit. But if you are going to be here, truly be here, bring something real, not something rehearsed. In that moment, even people who had arrived with their own biases began to shift their thinking. It was no longer just about political sides. It was not about party lines or family reputations. It was no longer about left or right. It was not about political parties or family names. It was about who had truly lived the weight behind their words and who was simply borrowing words from others. Barron stood quietly. For the first time that evening, he looked less like a speaker and more like a student. And Jasmine, she did not boast. She did not celebrate a victory. She folded her hands on the table and waited for the next question. But in that pause, something else was taking shape. Something that would echo long after people left the auditorium. It was not the volume of her voice that stayed with them. It was the weight of her experiences. The moderator moved the conversation back to the panel, yet the atmosphere in the room did not return to normal. The crowd was not noisy. They were locked in, leaning forward, eyes moving between Crockett and Barron like spectators at a tennis match waiting for the next serve. That was when Crockett, without being prompted, began to explain her background. I was not always in Congress, she said, still calm. I was not born into connections or a platform. I spent 12 years standing up for people nobody wanted to listen to. The room grew quiet once more. She shared the story of Marcus Bellamy, an 8th grade student suspended and charged with a crime after resisting when a school officer grabbed his backpack. They claimed he was being aggressive, she said, but all he was doing was trying to keep his notebook from being taken away. Inside that notebook were drawings, anime sketches, a doodle of Sonic the Hedgehog. She did not rush the story. She let it settle in. The system did not care about the details. Marcus was labeled, processed, and made to feel worthless at 13. His mother worked 2 jobs and slept in her car during the trial just so she could attend his hearings. You want to talk about outrage? I would love to see you try whispering your way through that. Nobody spoke over her. Not the moderator, not Barron, not even the staff sitting near the camera equipment. It was no longer a speech. It was something deeper. She continued. There is this story told, she said, that black women in politics are too emotional, too blunt, that we are aggressive or only putting on a show. But here is the truth. Try surviving in rooms not built for you. Rooms where staying calm means you go unnoticed, and speaking up means you get labeled. Then tell me how much tone matters. She shifted slightly, just enough to turn toward Barron without locking eyes with him. You came here with a plan. You thought if you pushed me, I would prove your point for you. But what you did not expect was how much restraint it takes to hold back without letting everything burn down around you. Barron swallowed hard, this time visibly. There was no smirk, no polite nod, no sharp comeback waiting, only quiet stillness. The look of someone beginning to understand that he brought a small weapon to a much bigger fight. Crockett leaned forward slightly again. You want to lead? She asked. Then ask better questions. Not questions that earn you applause, but questions that keep you awake at night. Ask yourself who you would be willing to lose votes for. Ask what you would risk your career for. And if your answer is nothing, then you are not ready. That statement lingered. Even older audience members, congressional staff, invited guests, retired teachers began to shift in their chairs, because what Crockett was doing was not an attack. It was not payback. It was teaching through honesty that did not soften the truth. And it did not end with Barron. She widened her focus. I say this to every young person watching, not only the ones with famous family name, she said. Do not waste your voice trying to sound important. Use it to say something important. She leaned back then, allowing another moment of silence to settle in. The moderator looked caught off guard, not because he disagreed, but because moments like this were not meant to happen on live television. Not with schedules, planned graphics, and commercial breaks lined up. But no one dared cut to a commercial. Barron adjusted his microphone. He looked down briefly, then lifted his eyes again. I did not mean any disrespect, he said, his voice softer now. I thought I was coming in prepared. I see I missed something. Crockett did not smirk, nor did she soften too much. Then, take that and learn, she said. Holding the microphone does not make you right. Listening might. By the time the next panelist spoke, the internet had already decided whose words carried the most weight, even spoken quietly. You could feel it. The atmosphere had shifted, not just between them, but throughout the entire space. What started as a strictly organized forum had opened up into something far less tidy, but far more real. And Barron Trump, standing at the center of it all, was no longer performing. He was thinking. The tension had not vanished, but something had shifted. Crockett's words did not just land, they stayed. Her stories were not distant examples. They were tied to real people. To memories, to broken systems with names, documents, and pain behind them. There was no way to counter that with numbers or a rehearsed reply. This was not a debate. It was lived experience meeting assumption face to face. Barron sat differently now, still upright, still composed, but something had changed. The tension in his shoulders was gone. So was the confidence in his stare. In its place was something softer, something new from him. Humility. The moderator tried to guide the discussion back, shifting to a question about digital privacy laws, but attention had already split. Even the other panelists found it hard to move on. The moment still hung heavy in the room, too present to ignore. Online, clips were already spreading, but not the dramatic ones, the quiet back and forths, the silences. Crockett saying, "The mic does not make you right." Barron replying, "I see I missed something." Those moments were moving fast because they felt rare, like honesty had slipped through the format. A producer backstage leaned in and whispered into the moderator's earpiece. They were over time, but no one wanted to cut the exchange short. The tone had shifted, and ending the segment now would feel like leaving during something honest. When the moderator returned to Barron, he did so gently. "Would you like to respond to what the Congresswoman said?" Barron paused. Even that was unexpected. 15 minutes earlier, he had walked in ready to take control. "I think I came here trying to sound smart," he said slowly. "But maybe I should have come to ask better questions." No applause, just silence. The kind people give when they are paying attention. Crockett said nothing. She didn't have to. The message had landed, and it was being received. It was no longer about political lines. Something between them had broken open, something that went deeper than sides. It had become a moment about growth, about what it means to be seen, to be challenged, and to learn out loud. That was what struck people most. It was not about who had won. It was that she revealed something familiar, that confidence often stands in for insight. That loudness is not the same as being correct. That having a platform does not mean you are ready to use it well. For Barron, it was a turning point. Whether he fully realized it or not, something in him had changed. It showed in how he looked at her now, not with frustration and with pride, but with thought, with interest. It did not make him weak. It made him real. And maybe for the first time that evening, he saw her as real too. Not just as a voice from across the aisle, but as someone who had lived the things she spoke of. The panel went on. More questions were asked. Ideas were shared. But the energy never fully reset. In the back, Elijah Marino, the same young organizer who tried to warn Barron earlier, leaned in and said quietly, "That's what real leadership looks like. When you sit with something you didn't expect." Barron didn't reply. He gave a small nod. Not for the cameras, not for the room, just to himself. But the part that surprised people most came after the event was over. There was no grand closing, no loud reactions, just a normal wrap-up. The moderator thanked the panel. The cameras panned, credits rolled. Outside the Civic Center in Grand Rapids, though, something new had started. Within an hour, the clip spread first on X, then TikTok, then YouTube, especially on pages built for this kind of unexpected moment. But this time was different. It wasn't driven by outrage or twisted edits. People were stopping to watch the full exchange, Crockett's full response, the nuance, the calm, the way she explained without lecturing. Even those who did not usually agree with her wrote things like, "I don't vote her way, but she handled that with respect. This is what accountability looks like." And about Barron, "Say what you want." But he didn't walk away. He stayed and listened. By morning, Crockett's office inbox was overflowing, not with reporters at first. Those came later, but with messages from teachers, students, and working mothers who said they saw themselves in her words. Some shared memories of their first jobs in courtrooms. Others wrote about their children dealing with the same school systems she had described. None of it felt staged. It was real and personal. And Barron was trending too, but in another way. Of course, not all of it was kind. That is the internet. There were jokes, memes, side-by-side images of his face before and after Crockett's response, but there was also something unexpected. Respect. Not praise for his opening comment, but respect for what he did afterward, for staying in his seat, for listening, for trying to adjust in the moment, instead of storming off, interrupting, or pretending it had not happened. Later that evening, he posted a short video, just a simple, vertical clip from his phone. No background music, no fancy lighting. "Last night, I tried to make a point and learned a better one," he said, looking straight at the camera. "You do not have to agree with someone to learn from them, and I learned something. Thank you, Congresswoman Crockett." It was not revolutionary, but it was significant. Crockett did not repost it, nor did she make a big public reaction. Instead, her team released a statement the following day that spoke volumes without saying too much. Public spaces work best when people show up willing to listen. That includes all of us. Last night showed what those spaces can be. Behind the scenes, their teams had already exchanged emails, not about media appearances, but about connecting privately away from the cameras, possibly even planning a youth-led roundtable in Dallas later that summer. That was the part nobody saw coming, because usually, viral political moments flare up quickly and disappear just as fast. But this one stayed warm, it stayed thoughtful. It left people reflecting instead of just clapping. Soon, the segment was picked up by 3 major Sunday morning news shows. Each broadcasted a slightly different edit of the moment. But it was not just the sharp one-liners that got airtime. It was the bigger context, the way Crockett spoke, the way Barron shifted his posture, the look on his face when she said, "You confuse volume with vision." High school government teachers began assigning it as a discussion topic. One college debate coach tweeted, "I have coached national champions, and I have never seen a takedown as respectful, precise, or instructive as what Jasmine Crockett did last night." And somewhere in all that chatter, a quieter truth came forward, that we have forgotten how powerful it is when people come ready for a fight, but instead end up learning something. But beyond all the hashtags and headlines, something deeper had taken root, and that is the part that matters most. For many, it was simply another clip, something they watched on the train, during lunch, maybe texted to a friend with a laughing emoji or a short comment. But for some, it struck a deeper chord. Because what happened on that stage was not just a clash between generations, or political parties, or public figures. It was something we rarely witness these days, growth happening in real time. What Jasmine Crockett gave that night was more than a rebuttal, it was a roadmap. She demonstrated how to stay anchored in personal experience when confronted by privilege packaged as performance. Even more importantly, she reminded everyone watching what calm looks like when it comes from truth, rather than ego. She did not try to humiliate Barron. He stepped onto that stage aiming to score a viral clip, something he could repost to boost his speaking circuit. Instead, he got something else, a moment where he had to face himself live on television and realize that confidence without depth collapses quickly. And that is what stayed with people. Because how many times have we seen someone double down, raise their voice, blame editing, or walk off the stage? And how rare is it to see someone, especially someone young, pause, reflect, and admit, I missed something. Especially for someone that young to pause, reflect, and honestly say, I missed something. For Barron, it could have gone very badly. But by not faking it, by staying in the discomfort and avoiding spin, he turned that silence into something that actually mattered, something human. Not everyone gets that chance. Even fewer recognize it when it comes. For Crockett, this was never about scoring points. You could see it in how she handled herself. No smug smile, no grandstanding, no social media storm, just clarity. She had been in enough real fights to know the best lessons do not bruise, they shift how people think. That is what leadership looks like, whether you wear a suit or a hoodie. It stopped being about politics. It became about presence, about what happens when someone brings their full story into the room and does not back down when it is tested, and what happens when someone expecting to impress realizes they are out of their depth, but chooses not to pretend otherwise. Naturally, the media tried to turn it into a moment. Some headlines called it a verbal takedown, others painted it as a generational clash, but those takes missed the deeper point. This was not a showdown. It was one of those rare public exchanges where everyone involved walked away a little better. There is something refreshing in watching two people from completely different lives, with opposing views and experiences, share a moment that was not polished, not politically clean, but real. One person speaking from scars, and the other actually listening. Maybe that is the real lesson, that it is okay to walk into a space thinking you have more answers than you do, as long as you are willing to walk out a bit quieter, a bit more thoughtful. One moment will not change everything. It won't fix political divides or rewrite old systems, but it can plant something, a shift, a thought, a challenge. And in a time where so much conversation feels like performance, this one reminded us of something we rarely practice: hearing each other, even briefly. So maybe next time someone walks into a space ready to win, they will stop and ask, what am I really here for? What happened that night in Grand Rapids wasn't explosive. There were no shouting matches, no storming out, no emotional speeches. Oddly enough, that's exactly what made it meaningful. It did not rely on drama, it relied on truth. It had two people, one shaped by experience, and one still finding his in a crowd of strangers who witnessed something shift in real time, not through yelling, not through snappy comebacks, through actual conversation that opened something up. And here's the thing, we do not get many of those moments anymore. Especially in political spaces, most of what we see is just noise, people shouting over each other, cutting in, posturing, spinning. But this wasn't that. This was one person grounded in real experience, and another realizing that living through something shapes how you speak. You could feel the weight in Crockett's voice, not because she raised it, but because she did not need to. She had facts, cases, names, courtroom stories that do not fit into slogans, and you could see Barron stop trying to score points and start trying to understand. That shift, him slowing down, staying put, that was the real moment. And no, this is not about casting one person as a hero or the other as a villain. It was about the pause, the moment when a young man raised in comfort and influence faced someone who had fought for every space she had been in and realized he had more to learn than he expected. That moment, that breath was stronger than any clever line, because real growth lives in that space between confidence and humility. And maybe that is the takeaway. We are not meant to win every exchange. Sometimes we need to let go of pride to gain insight. Sometimes the best use of a microphone is not defending your point, but admitting when you missed it. And maybe that is where leadership actually starts, not with the speech, a platform, or a famous name, but with choosing to listen when it would be easier to argue. To stay in the seat when pride tells you to walk. To say, I see I missed something, and mean it. Jasmine Crockett showed us that real strength isn't always loud, and Barron Trump, unexpectedly, showed us that listening, especially in public, is its own kind of strength. That town hall didn't solve any major issue overnight, but it gave us a look at what it might be like if more of us came to the table open to being changed, not just heard. And that is something worth holding on to. So here is the question. When was the last time you truly listened? Not to respond, but to understand? When was the last time you sat with discomfort long enough to learn from it? Think about that. And if this story meant something to you, if it made you stop, reflect, or look at things in a new way, do not let it stop here. Share it. Talk about it. Ask deeper questions. Listen harder. And remember this: you do not need to win the room to leave an impact. You just need to bring something real. If this story mattered to you, hit subscribe. We share stories that last because sometimes the quietest moments say the most.